From the earliest memories I possess, my world felt like a tightly packed suitcase, with me as the oversized item always threatening to burst the seams. My name is Alara, and for as long as I can recall, I was reminded, subtly and overtly, that I was simply too much. Too loud, too emotional, too hungry, too present, but most acutely, too big, not just in spirit, but in form. My family, a seemingly normal, bustling unit from the outside, had a silent, collective agreement. Alara needed to shrink. Our family dinners were a ritual of subtle criticisms disguised as concern. "Are you sure you need another helping, Alara? You're such a big girl," my mother would say, her voice soft, but her eyes conveying a message that cut deeper than any shout. My father, a man of few words, often communicated through sighs and pointed glances. If I reached for a second slice of pie, his gaze would linger, a silent judgment that curdled the sweetness in my mouth. My siblings, older and seemingly effortlessly slender, would often chime in with their own helpful advice, recommending diets or exercise routines, always prefaced with, "We just want you to be healthy, Alara." But I knew what they meant. They wanted me to be small, to fit, to disappear. I was a child who loved food, not just eating it, but the process of it, the way flavors mingled, the comfort it offered. In a home where I often felt like an outsider, food was my solace, my quiet rebellion. It was the one thing that didn't judge, that didn't demand I be anything other than myself. But even that was tainted by their constant scrutiny. The kitchen, which should have been a place of warmth and creation, became a battleground for my self-worth. As I grew into my teenage years, the comments sharpened. It wasn't just about my plate anymore, it was about my presence. I remember one summer, I bought a vibrant floral dress that I absolutely adored. I felt beautiful in it, for the first time in a long time. I wore it to a family barbecue, eager for a compliment, for some affirmation. Instead, my aunt, with a pitying smile, remarked, "That's a very bold pattern for someone your size, dear. Don't you think it makes you look even bigger?" The laughter that followed, though gentle, felt like 1,000 tiny needles pricking my skin. I retreated, changed, and never wore that dress again. Each instance chipped away at my confidence, building a wall of insecurity around me that felt impenetrable. I started to believe them. I started to internalize the idea that I was inherently flawed, that my very existence was an inconvenience. I became withdrawn, quiet, always trying to make myself smaller, both physically and emotionally. I'd hunch my shoulders, avoid eye contact, and speak only when spoken to. The irony was, the more I tried to disappear, the more I seemed to draw their critical attention. It was a vicious cycle, fueled by their expectations and my desperate attempts to meet them. The breaking point arrived, as these things often do, during a seemingly innocuous family gathering. It was Thanksgiving, a day meant for gratitude and togetherness, but for me, it had always been a performance. The sprawling dinner table, laden with my mother's exquisite cooking, was both a feast and a firing squad. The air was thick with the scent of roasted turkey, cranberry sauce, and the unspoken tension that always accompanied my presence. I had spent the morning helping my mother in the kitchen, carefully setting the table, arranging the silverware, polishing the crystal. I'd even baked a pumpkin pie, a recipe I'd painstakingly perfected. I tried to be useful, to be indispensable, hoping that my contributions would somehow earn me a temporary reprieve from their judgment. As the family gathered, the usual cacophony of greetings and forced pleasantries filled the dining room. I sat down, trying to make myself as unobtrusive as possible, at the far end of the long mahogany table, a place I'd unconsciously claimed as my own over the years. Conversation flowed around me, a river of anecdotes and updates that I mostly observed from the banks. My father, at the head of the table, was holding court, recounting a story about a recent business deal. Everyone was laughing, engaged, looking at him with admiration. I watched, a familiar ache in my chest. Then, a cousin, a boisterous man named Mark, leaned back in his chair, almost knocking over a centerpiece. "Oops, sorry," he chuckled, gesturing broadly. "Guess I'm taking up too much space, huh, Uncle?" My father, still beaming from the attention, casually glanced down the table towards me. Without missing a beat, without a trace of malice, but with an undeniable dismissive tone, he said, "Well, Mark, at least you're not Alara. She really does take up a lot of space, doesn't she?" The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The laughter that had filled the room a moment before died down, replaced by an awkward silence. Then, slowly, it started again. A nervous chuckle from my aunt, a muffled giggle from a cousin, a few polite titters from my siblings. My mother, bless her heart, gave a weak, apologetic smile, but said nothing. No one contradicted him. No one defended me. They just laughed. My own family laughed. In that instant, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the words. It was the casual cruelty, the effortless dismissal, the collective amusement at my expense. It was the culmination of a lifetime of feeling unwanted, unseen, and unloved. I felt a searing hot shame flush through me, quickly followed by a cold, righteous anger. I looked around at their faces, their eyes darting away, their smiles fading into uncomfortable grimaces. They were all complicit. I pushed back my chair, the loud scrape against the polished floor cutting through the residual laughter. All eyes turned to me. My father looked surprised, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Alara, what's wrong?" he asked, as if genuinely bewildered by my reaction. I stood there, trembling, my voice barely a whisper, yet ringing with a clarity I hadn't known I possessed. "I'm leaving," I said, my gaze sweeping across each of their faces. "I'm leaving this table, and I'm going to build my own." I didn't wait for a response. I didn't pack a bag. I just walked out of that dining room, out of that house, and into the cold November air, leaving behind the warmth of the turkey and the chill of their indifference. The drive was a blur. I drove for hours, aimlessly at first, then with a growing sense of purpose. I called a friend, crashing on her couch for the night, and the next day I began to plan. I had a small savings account, money I'd squirreled away from part-time jobs, dreaming of a future that felt increasingly distant. Now, that future was staring me in the face, demanding action. I looked at a map, a vast expanse of possibilities. 3,000 miles. That number stuck in my head. It felt far enough to truly start over, far enough to escape the shadow of their laughter. I chose a city on the opposite coast, a vibrant, sprawling metropolis I'd only ever seen in travel magazines. It was a place of new beginnings, a place where no one knew Alara, the girl who took up too much space. It was a place where I could redefine myself. The journey itself was a pilgrimage. 3,000 miles of open road, of endless skies, of gas station coffee and cheap motels. Each mile I put between myself and my past felt like a layer of skin shedding. I cried, I raged, I felt an exhilarating, terrifying freedom. I listened to podcasts about starting businesses, about finding purpose, about building a life from scratch. I was terrified, yes, but for the first time, I felt truly alive. Arriving in the new city was overwhelming. The sheer scale of it, the anonymity, the relentless pace. I felt like a tiny speck in a vast ocean. My small savings dwindled quickly, eaten up by rent and basic necessities. I took on a series of odd jobs, waiting tables, dog walking, proofreading, anything to keep myself afloat. Loneliness became a constant companion. There were nights I would curl up in my tiny apartment, the city lights outside a mocking reminder of the vibrant life I hadn't yet found, and wonder if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. The voices of my family, their criticisms, would echo in my mind, whispering doubts. But something had shifted within me. That anger, that fierce resolve born at the Thanksgiving table, had not faded. It had hardened into a core of pure determination. I was not going back. I would not let them be right. I would not be the girl who disappeared. I would be the woman who built. And what I would build, I realized, was a table. A table where everyone was welcome, where no one was too much, where food was a celebration of life, not a source of shame. I had always loved baking. It was my secret refuge in my childhood home, a quiet act of creation that brought me immense joy. In my new city, I started baking again, not just for comfort, but with a renewed passion. I experimented with recipes, infused them with my own unique flavors, and shared them with my new tentative acquaintances. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People loved my sourdough, my cardamom buns, my rich chocolate torts. They loved the warmth and care I poured into every creation. Slowly, painstakingly, an idea began to take shape: a bakery. A small, cozy place where people could gather, share stories, and feel at home. It was a daunting prospect. I had no business experience, little capital, and endless self-doubt, but I pushed through. I took evening classes on small business management, learned about marketing, and spent countless nights perfecting my recipes. I found a tiny, rundown storefront in a quirky neighborhood, saw its potential, and poured every ounce of my energy and savings into transforming it. I named it The Gathering Table. It was a deliberate choice, a defiant reclaiming of the very concept that had once been used to diminish me. I wanted to create a space that was the antithesis of my childhood home, a place where the aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air, where laughter was genuine, and where every person felt seen and valued. The first few months were brutal. Long hours, sleepless nights, the constant worry of making ends meet. But I wasn't alone. I found a community of fellow small business owners, artists, and dreamers who welcomed me with open arms. They shared advice, offered support, and became the chosen family I had always yearned for. There was Maria, the owner of the flower shop next door, who brought me fresh blooms every morning. There was Leo, the barista from the cafe down the street, who taught me the intricacies of coffee making. And there were my customers, who quickly became friends, their daily visits a testament to the warmth and comfort my bakery provided. I built a long, communal table in the center of my bakery, a beautiful, reclaimed wood piece that invited people to sit together, strangers and friends alike. It became the heart of The Gathering Table. I watched as people shared stories, celebrated milestones, and simply enjoyed each other's company over my pastries and coffee. I saw smiles, heard genuine laughter, and witnessed connections forming. This was my table, and I was not just taking up space. I was creating it, filling it with joy, community, and deliciousness. As the bakery thrived, so did I. The endless hours, the physical demands, the sheer joy of creation, it all transformed me. I didn't just lose weight. I shed the immense burden of insecurity and self-loathing. I stood taller, spoke louder, and laughed more freely. My eyes, once downcast, now met others with confidence. I learned to appreciate my body, not for how small it could be, but for its strength, its ability to carry me through this incredible journey, and its capacity to create. I was no longer Alara, the girl who was too much. I was Alara, the woman who built a thriving business and a beautiful life 3,000 miles away. The revenge wasn't something I actively sought, but it arrived in its own powerful way. One afternoon, a food blogger, known for her national reach, stumbled into The Gathering Table. She loved the atmosphere, the story, and most importantly, the food. Her glowing review went viral, and suddenly my little bakery was featured in national magazines and online publications. My face, beaming with pride, was plastered across websites and social media feeds. The story of The Gathering Table, a haven built on inclusivity and deliciousness, resonated with thousands. One day, I received a message from an old friend from my hometown. "Alara," she wrote, "I saw the article about your bakery. It's incredible. My mom saw it too. She said your dad saw it on a newsfeed. He didn't say anything, but she said he looked at it for a long, long time." That was it. No apology, no direct confrontation, no grand gesture, just a quiet secondhand message. But it was enough, more than enough. The silence from them spoke volumes. They saw. They knew. The girl they had dismissed, the one who took up too much space, had not only found her own space, but had built an entire world within it, a world that was now celebrated far beyond their narrow perceptions. My success, my happiness, my vibrant, full life, that was my sweetest revenge, not born of malice, but of self-love and defiant creation. I never went back to that Thanksgiving table. I didn't need to. I had built a new one, infinitely more welcoming, infinitely more nourishing, 3,000 miles away. And at my table, there was always space. Space for everyone. And most importantly, space for me, exactly as I am.